Good evening and welcome to the Planning Applications Committee. Can we take apologies for absence, please? Peter Southgate's in the car park, and I don't know whether we've got. Can you just go?
Looking for Councillor Crowe, and in terms of absence, David Dean is unavailable until time.
Thank you for understanding it. Declarations of pecuniary interest, anybody?
You remember those days that I had to declare a usual interest in item 17 as I chaired the design review panel meeting, and that listened to this. I think it was a pre-app at that stage, but a long time ago.
Minutes of the previous meeting. Sorry.
It wasn't a pre-app, it was a new one. Otherwise I wouldn't do that. If it is even
Item 17, deliveries, I've got a connection to the site where we own the lease and therefore
It is fine. Myself as well, with item 17, we're not taking part in the debate, and I'll hand the chair to Councillor G. So we're all correct and present.
Thank you, Chair. Item 13, Felix Hotel. I have an interest in a property which backs onto Building C, so I will be participating, and I think I've been asked to give the chair as well.
For the public's information, if you are going to be speaking tonight, you will have 3 minutes. There's a traffic light system here. When it gets to amber, it means you've got a minute left. So if you could recognise that, and when it turns red, please be ready to stop. Otherwise, I will have to stop you, which is not easy. We have 33 speakers tonight. Now, if you multiply that up, with agents getting double the time, it works out about 2 hours of people speaking. So on time, that would be 9:15 before we got through public speaking. Before it goes to members of the committee and officers. So we want to make sure that all items on the agenda are dealt with fairly and that they've given a good debate. But I would ask people to be concise, think about what it is, questions and comments you want to make, and make them succinctly, please, so that we can hopefully get through the whole agenda. We have 12 items. It's going to be a tall order, and it may get to the point where we have to decide whether or not to remove or get it in at 10:30. So let's see how we go, but please bear that in mind. The officers are going to introduce the reports, and we are going to take the order of the agenda as it is in the report. Thank you. Sorry, with the exception of those without speakers that are moved to the rear, and those ones are just for information. Agenda item 15, 16, and 17, and 9. Sorry. Oh, I've got wrong paper. Yeah, we're getting a different one. Sorry, let me do that again. 9, 12 and 15. That's Woodman, Standor and Rural. Okay? So I'll hand over to officers now to introduce the first item, which is agenda item 5, Deacon House, 10 Atherton Drive, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the application site is located in the cul-de-sac road known as Atherton Drive. The site comprises a chalet bungalow with associated garaging, parking area and garden area. The site is located within the Wimbledon North Conservation Area and is adjacent to a greater listed building, which is located to the south. The site currently consists of other residential plots. The application proposal is for an extension to the dwelling on the west elevation, which will incorporate a basement, ground and first floor. The proposal also includes a detached garage in the east corner with an internal car lift and a basement car parking area. The basement car park would house the applicant's car collection and is not proposed to be used for commercial purposes. The basement will have 8 car parking spaces and have a footprint of 260 square metres. The depth of the car basement would be 4.4 metres from ground level to finished floor level, and the house basement will be 3.2 metres from ground level to floor level. Just touching on drainage, The proposal will incorporate permanent block paving to the new driveway surface leading up to the new garage. Below this would be a geosolar storage tank 1.4 metres deep, which drains surface water to a new surface water flow control, discharging at a control rate off-site to the surface water ceiling. So talking you through the plans, members, this is the proposed block plan, just shows development at its above ground level. There's the extension there, and the new garage there. Again, the extension is there. First floor, 2 bedrooms and a hallway. Basement and ground level. This is the extension proposed here. Matching materials to the existing dwelling. This is the proposed garage. Single storey structure. And this is the proposed basement for the garage. So you'll see here, this is the space which would have the proposed car lift internally, and this is all below ground level for the 8 parking spaces. And above ground here, you can just see the outline of the proposed garage as well. We have a section drawing submitted with the application. Just to give you an idea, I referred to some of the heights earlier, but that's just for the information purposes there. In terms of site pictures, this is where the extension would go to the property. It would essentially come out here. That's just a view looking at a property on Acton Drive, just north of the boundary. That's the existing dwelling. There are a couple of TPO trees on the site, this being one of them here. This is the area where the proposed garage would be. Currently is largely overgrown with vegetation and overlying trees. So that's where the proposed garage would be, existing there along with the access to the basement. And that's just a view from the driveway entrance showing the existing garage on the site. And that's another tree on site which is TPO protected, that is to be retained. That's just a view from where the extension is proposed, just looking south, where you can see the boundary treatment there, and just about seeing the property beyond. Turn members' attention now to the mod sheet. You'll see we've had several more representations and objections to the proposal. We've summarised them there for you. Further to this, officers have proposed some amendments to conditions. Condition 11, just to update the wording to the latest tree report. They came with condition 13. Condition 16 to be deleted, this is already at condition 8. And an additional condition, really just in regard to recommending from our tree officer in regard to impact on protecting neighbouring trees. So overall, Chair, proposals considered to satisfactorily be accommodated on the site without causing harm to the conservation area, adjacent listed building, neighbouring amenity and flood risk. It's also recommended permission be granted. Thank you.
So I have Leon Fertile to speak, please.
How do I get the microphone?
There's a little button, a silver button.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm speaking against the application. I will focus on 2 important objections, both of which result in the failure of the application to meet Merton's policy guidelines DMD2, and both of which are based on the scientific evaluation of the facts. First, there is no basement impact assessment. Where appropriate, Council Policy DMD2C requires a basement impact assessment. Neighbours have submitted 4 reports from 2 separate, highly qualified expert geologists who explain exactly why a basement impact assessment is most likely required for our circumstances. Uncertain groundwater flows, steep slopes, potential for heaves, subsidence, etc. These experts have advised that there are serious risks of groundwater emergence and mass instability in the area. The officer's report seems to believe that reliance on a condition, number 18, mandating a fully detailed basement construction method statement prior to works will satisfy the requirement. However, our experts have made it clear that a basement construction method statement is not at all the same as a basement impact assessment. And without a basement impact assessment, the committee cannot be assured that approval will not harm neighbouring properties. Therefore, the application is not compliant with DMD2. Second, the loss and damage that will be caused to neighbours' trees The MD2B states that basement construction should not cause loss, damage, or long-term threat to trees of townscape or amenity value. The applicant will destroy or damage between 14 to 18 trees of merit on his site. However, there are another 8 neighbouring trees which are also at risk of damage. The applicant's tree experts have provided only subjective comments regarding these off-site trees, whereas public consultants have provided a full appraisal, and their conclusion is that all 8 trees are highly likely to be damaged by the basement excavations. All the trees are of significant amenity value to the residents on whose properties they are located. They provide screening, shade, cover, and nesting for bird life and land stability. The trees and the screening they provide are an important aspect of the conservation area. So we have 26 trees of merit which will be destroyed or at serious risk of damage, a huge loss of tree mass, and most certainly a significant loss of residents and amenity. Once again, the application is not compliant with DMD2, and the new condition 21 does not solve that problem because it does not change the structure of the basements. What we have in a conservation area is the possible destruction of up to 26 trees to facilitate an underground car park for minimum 12 vehicles, along with a basement games room, with vegetation replaced by paving, with resultant noise and air and traffic pollution, with serious hydrogeological and land stability risks to nearby properties, including a Grade 2 listed building. This just cannot be right for a conservation area. Also puzzling is why there's no condition for a construction traffic management plan. Atherton Drive is a tiny cul-de-sac. Huge lorries trampling up and down would be dangerous if not properly managed. A CTMP is absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew McPhee, please.
Good evening. My name is Matthew McPhee. I'm a solicitor with Richard Buxton Environmental and Public Law, constructed by residents of 8 Atherton Drive and 19 and 25 Callum Road. I assume that you've all had the chance to review our letter and the expert reports that we provided, which raise serious concerns in relation to the application. If you've not, I strongly encourage you to do so and to adjourn.
And if a complainant were to continue to lead with a procedural unfairness, wouldn't they have a recourse outside of this meeting by other legal means?
In terms of procedure, the application was on the agenda of the Federal Committee beforehand. Upon further assessment, we realised that the applicant hadn't submitted the site investigation report. We had therefore pulled it and reconsulted all neighbours who come to the application on that extra information, which is on the website. The heights of the basement have always been on the website on the method of construction statement. That's been there, and also the plan that showed that section drawing of the basement itself. So in terms of consultation procedures, we're happy with that.
Thank you, Chair. 2 quick questions. First of all, could the officer tell me what the distance between the outer edge of the basement wall and the foundations of 21 Callum Road are, and 19 Callum Road, and especially 21 Callum Road, because that's a Grade 2 listed building. And secondly, this is, as an engineer, I'm asking this question, why are the 2 engineering geological reports so different?
To start with the geological engineering reports, you mean the third-party ones and the applicants. I'm not a qualified engineer. I don't know, but there is a difference in professional opinion on that aspect. But the key thing with this is that our published engineer has looked at the submission and is happy. In terms of distance from the outer wall of the basement to the foundations of the neighbouring bodies, I wouldn't know if this is the foundations. I can potentially take out a plan to measure, if we have a scale, from the outer wall of the basement to the outline of the neighbouring bodies, if I can do that. In terms of the distance from the basement of the house to number 19 to the south, those measuring up at about 8.5 metres. Obviously it's far away from the basement car park proposed. In terms of an estimation, it's not outlined on this plan, but you're looking at over 20 metres to number 19. To number 21, in terms of the basement to number 25, the closest point would be about 3 metres.
And what's the depth of the basement that they're proposing to build?
That is the actual depth of the basement would be 4.4 metres, the car park basement, which is measured from ground level to the finished floor level, and be 4.8 metres from ground level to the excavation depth.
Mr. Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. What does the London plan have to say about the maximum number of on-site parking spaces that we normally allow, given the low PTAR rating, I guess, and it wouldn't be more than 3 or 4, I don't think, would it? No. So can I carry on, Chair? So for the, what are we talking about? Sort of 8-9 cars here, we have to make a special case, do we? I mean, is it a subterranean showroom or a classic car museum? And what justification can we offer for allowing so much parking in excess of the London Plan guidelines?
It is a personal classic car collection that they're proposing to store there. So it's more of the fact that it's an application that's on its merits, even though it does go beyond what the London Plan would say. But it's more about new housing development rather than existing housing. So it is about whether this scheme works on its planning merits, having regard to the constraints. We have added a condition to tie it to ancillary storage to the main dwelling, so it can't be used for commercial purposes.
I'm sorry, but I'm still confused about the lack of a basement impact statement. I mean, it's obviously an enormous basement. I can't quite really understand why one wouldn't have asked for an impact statement, or to put it the other way round, how big and different would this basement have to be in order for an impact basement statement to be required?
So, Chair, I just intervene. When we're looking at holistically at basements, you're looking at all the statements that are submitted. It's like an environmental statement for a major scheme. It's not an actual, you have a summary statement, but actually what you're doing is collecting all the information from the other statements. So what we have here is the geological statement, the hydrology statement, and we actually have the construction method statement as well, albeit that will have to be approved later by condition. So that will then have to be ratified at that point. That is a pre-commencement condition. So in terms of basement impact assessment, it's a pretty generic term really to the information relating to this particular basement. The information has been submitted in terms of the hydrology, the geology, the impact of the basement, in terms of the construction management. That effectively is the basement impact assessment. Our officers have looked at those aspects in great detail, and they're satisfied that what they're seeing is perfectly okay in terms of trees, in terms of water, in terms of flooding. The one thing that's left over is the actual construction, which, as I mentioned before, we have a... Sorry, I apologise.
I don't know. Mine is just...
Sorry, I hope you can... Oh, we all got that. Not because we don't have something happening with the system, I'm afraid. Okay, can you hear me now? That's better. Yes, sorry. Apologies for that. I was explaining that the collective documents submitted as part of the application are in effect the basement impact assessment. Officers have assessed that and are satisfied that they are sufficient for the purposes of this particular proposal, albeit the detailed construction plan, which at the end of the day, if submitted, could be refused. If our engineers are not happy with that in terms of the specific construction, if they think it will affect other aspects of the scheme in terms of hydrology, not trees have been looked at by the horticultural officer, then theoretically that could be refused at that stage when the conditions submitted.
Any more questions, Councillor?
Thank you very much, Amelia. I think actually, once we've had answers to our questions, we'll delay ourselves much longer. Ordinarily, this would probably be a fairly simple case that we're fairly familiar with, albeit it's on a larger scale. I would come back to, I think, the point that Councillor Judge was moving us towards, was the risk that we might be taking in taking the officer's recommendation to approve this. And I think there are two issues we seek some assurance on. One is what we've talked about a lot, and the other actually is the Grade 2 listed building, and not only the house, but the motor house too, which that's over 100 years old, I'm told, and as cherished as the house. Perhaps you'd like to talk to us about the amount of care we need to take when digging holes near Grade 2 listed buildings. But my other and really crucial question, I think, does come back to the sort of the arms race we're having in documentation from experts here. I think it was 74 pages or whatever. 72, well, clearly I didn't have time to read it, so I didn't get to page 74. And that in itself isn't good. But you know, what you have to say to us kind of right now is pretty crucial. I mean, I think we need to know, one, what it said, because I mean, I'm a substitute here tonight, maybe others did have a chance to read this, but I doubt it because it was late. So I think we would like to know kind of what it said, what the concerns were, and why you have been relaxed about ignoring that and accepting your normal procedure, which, as I said earlier, we kind of always do, but you know, a 72-page document isn't quite like the angry neighbour saying my fence is at risk here. So I think this is a key moment.
65.
Yes, on your first point in terms of the listed building, we've got the listed building down here. Now, we haven't got that specific distance between that building, although we gave a guesstimate earlier, a reasonably accurate guesstimate in terms of the basement is around about here. So you're talking about a clear distance between the two structures, effectively. Now, absolutely, listed buildings are extremely important. But I think we are talking about at least 4 to 5 metres between the structures. And as you're aware, this committee and many developments in the borough, there have been schemes that we've approved on terrace buildings, for instance. Now, we haven't had any negative feedback on that as yet. So this committee has approved adjoining buildings being underpinned and made into basements. It's also the case that many listed buildings have basements themselves throughout the whole of London. It's a very common feature in London having basements, so it's not exactly entirely unusual. In terms of the reports that have been submitted, repeat myself again, we've had our experts internally having a look at those reports. I appreciate there's differences of opinion between the experts on these matters. We have to put those reports to our experts internally, and they have to come to a conclusion. And in this particular case, they have concluded in terms of trees it's fine, hydrology is fine, flooding is fine. Still have to look at the specifics of the construction, although we do have a construction method statement, a draft one that's been submitted, so we have a very good idea about what they propose to do. Basements, they're not all the same, but they're all reasonably similar. I do appreciate this one is a little bit deeper than most, maybe. A little bit larger than most, but it is an independent basement in a garden, a detached garden. I think that's what makes the difference here. In terms of just harking back to the London plan policy in cars, of course, policies are determined to try and, in that case, maximise. I mean, the maximum standards is to try and stop movements of vehicles effectively. Clearly, you could only move a certain number of vehicles at one time. The occupiers who are living there, they're not likely to be going in and out every day. So, maximum. I very much doubt they'll be using them very often, but it is in that sense it is a special circumstances on its merits issue. Yes, in terms of the legal document that's been submitted, I mean, we can, if you wish, we have done already, it did come in quite late in the day, although there were previous versions, we can refer that, if you desire, to our legal section for review before any decision is actually issued. So we can consult legal to see what their view is on that particular issue. So you can grant permission, if you wish, subject to that criteria.
What Councillor Southgate was saying about the detail and the London plan and the amount of parking. So if we were minded to grant this application, would we be making it conditional to the owner so that if they moved on, it would not be used as a park, a multi-storey car park virtually?
Yes, I understand the condition is related to ancillary to the property, so they would have to be used domestically effectively. Whether there be another person with such a collection is probably unlikely, but in this sense it has to be ancillary to the use of the dwelling house itself, so it couldn't be a car showroom or sales area, for instance.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back on what Councillor Sanders said, is there a condition that this is not going to be used as a commercial basement? And secondly, how will you monitor that in the future?
Well, let me just double check on the conditions, see what it actually says. Which condition was it? Number 19, let me just double check, says ancillary. Not be used, should be used for parking motor vehicles, ancillary to the domestic use of the house. In terms of monitoring it, I think we probably reliably rely on neighbours to report if there are any discrepancies of that particular condition.
Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to comments, please. Comments?
I think a person who owns land is entitled to use that land for any lawful purpose that they wish to, and if that is garaging a vintage car collection, they're entitled to do that so long as the application they put forward is compatible with planning policy and with the law affecting planning. And it seems to me that we do not have a good basis for saying it isn't in this case. Officers have looked at the hydrology reports and the reports in respect of the basement issue and trees, and are satisfied that the application is compatible. It's not going to cause adverse effects on neighbouring occupiers. And I think we have to accept the advice of officers. If it is contended that due procedure has not been followed by the solicitor for Richard Buxton on behalf of his client, then that is a matter for them to take elsewhere, namely in respect of a judicial review. But our officers and our legal advice is that we can properly make the decision this evening, and it's been suggested that that decision is conditional upon the council's lawyers looking at this matter after this meeting, and I would suggest we adopt that suggestion, but go on and proceed to make the decision this evening.
Okay. Any other comment?
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned that the two geological reports are different, very different to each other. I'm concerned that we've got a 4.4 metre depth basement, only 3 metres away from the nearest property in Cologne Road. If you look at councils like Westminster or Kensington Chelsea, before any planning application for a basement is submitted, they insist on a full design, they insist on a basement impact assessment, they insist on a construction traffic management plan, all fully designed before it is even submitted to planning. And I think Merton should be adopting things of that nature as well. So really, I won't be able to support this tonight.
Are there any other comments? Councillor James.
I think that we all not considerable misgivings about this application. Possibly this really is Merton's first ever 8-car house build, but equally we've been told by some of the objectors that the applicant has in fact a business dealing in I was going to say second-hand, but classic cars, and I realise that the fact that the air conditioning requiring non-commercial uses is effectively unenforceable, so we can't monitor it. I can't see it can monitor it effectively. And I've yet to hear, unfortunately, anyone put forward any really sustainable plans for objecting. But the fact that the experts do differ gives you serious cause for concern. And I certainly don't like a decision, either the decision delayed or, as Councillor Dodge suggested, that we wait for, well, they don't wait, but we make it subject to a condition that they're full legal examination.
Okay, shall I put this to the vote then? With the legal condition? Yeah. So delegated to officers in consultation with legal. Yeah. So those in favour of the application, please show. Yes. Subject to delegation to be consultation with legal. Thank you. Then the application will be successful. We now move on to agenda item 6. And can I say we have spent 50 minutes on that application. Okay, which means we're reducing our times on the others, but again, we need to make sure we give a full debate to each of these items. We are agenda item 6, garages rear of 30 to 40 Barnes End.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for the demolition of 24 garages and the construction of 2 new 3-bedroom dwellings with associated car parking and landscaping. Right. First slide here, it's the. You'll see the next application is coming up in a minute as well, looking at this side, but it's this actually triangular side we're looking at down here. You'll see that it's surrounded by residential properties, 2 stories, from photographs, but having, in terms of public viewpoints, it's very limited indeed in terms of public accessibility for people at this particular site. If I take you through this slide, you'll see this is the access way into the site. These are some of the neighbouring properties. You'll see the neighbouring properties 2 stories high. The garages themselves to be demolished. As you can see, they're reasonably well run down, and they will be replaced, proposed to be replaced by 2 semi-detached properties, 2 stories in height, but they are specifically designed very carefully to ensure that the neighbours are not impacted detrimentally in terms of the overlooking or overbearing. Coming to the plans in a second. Again, quite a few photographs of the actual site itself, just to give you a flavour of the existing position. Just to let you know, that's the access there that comes into the site. And if we look at the plans, you'll see here, these are the 2 houses, rear gardens, landscaping surrounding the properties as well. And As you can see, they're set away from the boundaries of neighbouring properties. And here we have the elevations of the property itself. As I say, designed with cat-slide roofs and sloping roofs to ensure there's less impact on the neighbouring properties, to ensure the development itself has less impact. Windows will be very carefully looked at, and you'll see in the report there's a lot of explanation about how overlooking is being reduced by the type of windows, and there's actually another condition attached through the modification sheet, which ensures that these particular two windows at the rear are actually raised up to the 1.5 at civil height to reduce the potential for overlooking into the neighbouring properties. Car parking provided on site. Our highways officers are happy in terms of access to the site, whether it be for deliveries or for emergency purposes. And the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Payne, please.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Payne and I live with my husband and family for 48 years at 9 Lakes Terrace. I'm objecting to the planning of two semi-detached houses at the rear of our property. I represent the residents of Lakes Terrace whose properties will be affected if planning is granted to build these houses. There have been over 30 objections from all the surrounding roads, Barnes End, West Barnes Lane, Cobham Avenue, Byron Avenue and Lakes Terrace. Along with our neighbours, we have enjoyed the open aspect to the rear of our properties with views of sky and trees. Merton's core planning strategy, CS48, states that they will improve the quality of the environment by requiring development to respect local character and amenity in surrounding residential neighbourhoods. These two-storey buildings, whose designs are completely different to all the surrounding properties, there are no buildings with timber cladding, will have a significant visual impact for existing properties in all directions, for both light and outlook, and will cause a very negative change to the feel of space. A major concern is the impact on privacy. Merton's local plan cites some policies. DM-D2AB says to ensure provision of appropriate levels of sunlight and daylight, quality of living conditions, amenity space and privacy to both proposed and adjoining buildings and gardens. The existing garages are less than a single storey high. If the proposed semi-detached buildings go ahead, our privacy and seclusion will be compromised due to their height and bulk. They will look straight into our bedrooms and gardens. This will particularly affect us during the winter months, as the roofline will obscure the sunlight to the ground floors and gardens of our properties for a good proportion of daylight hours. I understand that the boundary wall opening between Cobham Avenue and Barnes End is not now to go ahead. A further concern, however, regarding this former farm wall, which has significant historic value and is a reminder of the rural history of the area, is that if planning is approved and building work commences and the garages are demolished, the wall will be vulnerable, particularly during the removal of the northwestern garage block. The wall would need to be strengthened or rebuilt if necessary with the original bricks. Measures need to be put in place, and it should be put in the planning conditions of the build that the responsibility to rebuild the wall is with the builders. In conclusion, we object to these buildings being shoehorned into a very small brownfield site and hope you see fit to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Peter Beaver.
Good evening, I'm Peter Vegan and I live at 15 Lakes Terrace. I'm a landscape architect with 40 years experience of working with planners and developers in residential design. I represent myself, my family and many residents of Lakes Terrace and Barnes End. We object to the height, bulk and massing of the proposed buildings and their size and positioning in relation to existing properties. Their position in relation to Barnes End properties will lead to a wholly unacceptable loss of privacy. Despite the astonishing lack of any current design guide for Merton, it is clear from the last published Merton guidelines that the master bedroom and sloping escape windows are too close to the windows of the Barnes End flats, a mere 13 metres away. The officers appear to have confirmed that this is the case by raising the height of the bottom of the windows to 1.5 metres from their previous low level after we objected. However, this inadequate response will still allow unobstructed views into the windows of the Barnes End flats, by anyone standing in the new bedrooms and vice versa. Such sloping skylights are inappropriate fenestration for master bedrooms, and their efficiency as means of escape at this raised height has to be questioned. These windows will also overlook to an unacceptable degree the rear gardens of some Barnes End properties, falling as they do well within the 11 metres, which is the standard distance for separation of existing gardens and new windows. There are 44 households whose rear windows focus on this central triangular space. For between 60 and 80 years, these properties have enjoyed unobstructed views of trees and distant quality buildings, the existing low garages being insignificant in the view. The obtrusive bulk and mass of the proposed buildings would destroy this visual amenity currently enjoyed by tax-paying borough residents who look to planning officers and councillors to protect their living environment. We acknowledge the need for new dwellings, however, this is an inappropriate location. It is too small for the proposed two-storey buildings, it disrupts the existing pattern of streets and will cause major loss of privacy as well as a dramatic reduction in visual amenity of the many surrounding properties. Residents' own research in Barnes End shows a much greater demand for garage parking than is implied by the developer's planning statement. The last published Merton Design Guidance contains the following paragraph. Backland sites present particular difficulties when development is being considered. A substantial impact on the neighbouring dwellings can result. In general, the density of development which may be satisfactorily accommodated on such sites will be likely to be less than that which may be achievable on other types of sites. And there may be some sites where development of backland is not appropriate. If ever there is a site where such development is not appropriate, this is it. We urge you to refuse to grant permission.
Thank you. Call on Jonathan Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Members, before you a scheme that will deliver 2 new high-quality homes for the borough, which will help the council to meet strategic policy objectives. The design of our homes has been given careful consideration to ensure they respond to the surrounding context.
Could you please switch your microphone on? Thank you.
The design of our homes has been given careful consideration to ensure they respond to the surrounding context in massing, height, materials and architecture. The homes are generous in size and exceed the London Plan standards for accommodation. Car parking will be provided off-street in front of the homes and will not impact on-street car parking provision on Barnes End. In developing the proposals, the project team has been mindful throughout the important relationship between the new homes and the existing housing in the immediate surroundings. The proposed units have been orientated at the front and rear outlooks of the properties for direct overlooking into surrounding properties, and obscure glazing is provided on the side elevations to further prevent direct overlooking. The rear roof lights on the units have been repositioned in accordance with officer comments, so that the bottom of the roof lights are 1.5 metres above the finished floor level to reduce the possibility of overlooking. The proposed development will not result in a notable reduction in the amount of daylight or sunlight received by existing residents. The applicant has also acknowledged a lot of the existing garages, however these are now very run down, are not secure, have minimal natural surveillance and do not make the best use of this land in this urban location. The garages are let independently by the site owner, and the surveys undertaken in 2017 which show that the garages are mainly let for personal storage. Only one garage is currently used for daily car use. The proposed development will remove the garages and bring activity to the site, improving its safety and appearance. The proposal has been designed to meet the latest sustainability standards with an energy building fabric, photovoltaic panels, green roofs and sustainable drainage. The proposed development will also hazard address flood risk and reduce surface water flows when compared to the existing site. As noted by officers, the proposal has been meaningfully amended at various points throughout the planning process, including the removal of the proposed pedestrian cycle access to address neighbour comments. Overall, this is a scheme that provides planning benefits and has been through an iterative design process with officers to ensure its compatibility in relation to planning policy and all other relevant material planning considerations. We therefore request that members approve the application in line with the recommendation. Thank you.
Just a couple of responses there. In terms of the design, we recognise it's not exactly the same design as neighbouring properties, but we consider it to be absolutely appropriate in the context. As I said before, there are very few public viewpoints of this particular site as well hidden behind the existing two-storey houses, and it's in the same context of that, the same height as the neighbouring properties. In terms of daylighting, there's a report. The report explains that that's been looked at in detail. There's a report submitted with the application. Boundary wall, I'm not aware of it being listed in any form. We can talk to the applicants about informative about trying to protect it in some way. It does look quite attractive looking in photographs, but as far as I'm aware, it's not a listed wall, so we can't protect it in any way through policy. Means of escape was mentioned from these rear windows at the back. It's a building control matter really in terms of the means of escape. It's only a two-storey building, so means of escape is normally internally anyway. You always look at that kind of thing when you go up to the third storey. Overlooking, that's been assessed as part of the application. The building's orientated towards the street, as it were, in the front parking area. The rear garden, as you can see, side elements have obscure glazed windows. If we look at those side elevations, you've got a window there and a window there, both obscure glazed. So the direction of looking from these particular windows, clearly this distance here is quite significant. There'll be very little overlooking in terms of to the properties here. A little bit closer to the back end here, but it'll be quite an obscure angle. And garage parking, we've no policy to protect garages as such. From what we understand, they are used for storage at the moment and let separately to the residential properties. So there's no argument to say that the residents in that particular street use that specifically, or all those garages for their car parking. Clearly, if it was available, it might be useful. My experience, garages are sold, you can very rarely fit a car in. But that might not be the case, they may well fit in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to the resident submissions and there are very valid points made, but I'd like to have a few concerns of my own. I think it's extremely dangerous to have a property that is not accessible by emergency vehicles. If I can just quote one very sad incident that happened a couple of years ago on this site. There was a poor man that had hung himself in one of the garages. Somebody discovered this unfortunate event and the person was still alive. An ambulance was called, but unfortunately, because the ambulance could not get to the garages, valuable minutes were lost and the man died. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that no reference seems to be made to rubbish collection. And I know you're going to say that this is not a planning issue, but it should be. If it has been established that there is not enough space for large vehicles to enter the proposed site, it follows that a refuse lorry will not be able to get to the near the property at all. So it begs the question, how will the rubbish be collected? Is it proposed that the space will be left somewhere on the highway for up to 6 wheelie bins, 4 recycling boxes, and 2 food caddies to be left for collection? Also, are the new residents of this proposed development expected to wheel their rubbish on a weekly basis to this collecting point? Another point I would like to make is that any screening for privacy for the adjacent properties will be very difficult, as planting of trees and large shrubs will be not practicable due to the shrinkable clay soils on this site. Finally, I'd like to get clarification on the ownership of land which is proposed for access to the site. Is it true that part of the proposed access goes across privately owned land, the owner of which has not provided consent yet? Please bear these concerns in mind when making your decision. It has not been thought through properly and no consideration has been given to how it affects the local residents, who often I feel seem to be developers' last concern, when in fact they should be the first. If nothing else, the plan should be working for the benefit of the residents, not the other way around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Do you want to say anything about that? Right. Councillor.
Can I ask how wide the access road actually is, please?
Not specifically this one, so we'll try and find out exactly how wide it is. We have a highways officer here who will probably comment on that. In terms of, it's quite clear to me, in terms of emergency access, you don't actually have to necessarily get into sites like this, you have to move within a specific distance. Clearly it was an unfortunate incident, but normally ambulances, or more often than not, paramedics that arrive first. They will get in there, they're normally in cars. Clearly you can get in there, it's garages, so you can clearly get vehicles in. 2.7 metres apparently, so you can get vehicles in. If not, vehicles can quite happily stop there, and it's a very short walk to get to the premises. So I think our highways officers quite happy that the access is acceptable in this particular case.
Okay.
I put the question the other way round then. Is a fire brigade requirement to access those houses on foot if they can't get their fire engine down? I mean, is there guidance on that? Is that guidance?
The fire engine, we have discussed this before, is a very regs requirement. In this case, we got 45 meters fire engine, so this is well exceed. The distance is about 20 meters from the turning area. We got a wider turning area where fire engines and any emergency vehicles could turn and approach the houses in a forward manner.
Any other questions? Councillor Keith.
Thank you, Chair. The current 25 garages, I presume they're being used by vehicles that are being parked in there. Once they're demolished, where are those potentially 24 cars going to park?
I think you heard the applicant. I don't know. I haven't been in the garages. I know the case officer did manage to look at a couple of them that were used for storage. The anecdotal evidence is that very few cars parked there. So we don't have a policy to protect those garages in any event, so even if we did want them to retain that particular purpose, we haven't got a policy to do so. In any event, if you look at I can't see it now, the adjoining streets, I noticed going through to have a look, there is quite a lot of pavement parking available. It's quite a narrow entrance to the site and to the actual street itself, but there is parking available on the street and in surrounding roads as well.
Any other questions? Comments? No? Okay, then let's move to the vote. Those in favour of the application, please show. Those against? Not voting? Councillor Keith, did you put your hand up? I can't. Not voting, okay, thank you. Then the application is approved. We now move on to agenda item 7, which is garages room 49 to 55 Barnes End.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see, the site is right next door almost to the other side with the exact same access. So I don't propose to go to those particular issues again. If I take you straight to the site, that's the access into the site through the road. There's the actual access into the site where the single-storey building is going to potentially be located. As you can see, the access looking through, and if we come through to the garages, they're of a similar design. These are some of the local properties just showing they're also 2 stories in height, reasonably close to this particular property. Originally, the proposal was for a 2-storey house on this site, and we persuaded the applicant to go down to a single-storey. I'll come on to those plans in a minute. So in terms of this particular site, the building will be located will be slightly higher than the existing garages, but it will occupy a larger part of the site. Here, you can see the proximity of neighbouring properties. And if we label what's in the area, if we pull onto the plans. A few photographs there. Here's the plan. So that's the access way we were looking at up there. The existing garages are effectively where that blue dotted line is. Garage demolished, then you'd have 2 rectangles, one next to the other. That's single-storey, rear garden, and a parking space and access in. So look, that's the accommodation. So again, only single-storey. The one issue I point out here is, I think the only impact really is in the neighbours to the rear of what's being proposed now. They have an existing garage situation there in any event, which is around 3 metres high. The proposal will be for a 3.7 metre high wall. So this sort of element here is the additional impact on the neighbours to the rear of the property, but it's not 2 stories, it's a 1-storey and a little bit as well. There you go, you have a better view there. There's the existing garages and the impact on the neighbours to the rear. And there's the proposal. So there's very little difference in terms of absolute impact on neighbours. All the other relationships are considered to be acceptable. Car parking space is appropriate for this particular property, and the application is recommended for approval.
Peter Bacon, please.
I represent my own views, and I've also been asked to speak on this excuse me, by residents at Barnes End, Blake's Terrace and Cobham Avenue. This ugly, bunker-like building would impact the views and amenity of at least 16 surrounding properties, some of them seriously. It is entirely inappropriate in style to any nearby development. It would look like what it is, a result of desperate, unsuccessful compromises to try and shoehorn a dwelling into much too small a space, with profound effects on the existing neighbourhood. The building would be ludicrously close to 3 existing properties, only 8 metres from 85 Byron Avenue, 6.7 from 49 Barnes End, not much more than the length of a parking space. This gives rise to privacy issues. Past Merton guidelines, in the absence of any current ones, give a minimum distance of 20 metres between windows. The upstairs windows of 47 Barnes End will give a 12.4 metre view into the proposed master bedroom and a 10.4 metre view into the lounge. 85 Cobham Avenue would have a 13.5 metre view from upstairs into the corner window of the proposed bedroom 2 and a view into the kitchen. 49 Barnes End would have to tolerate stinking refuse bins next to their garden and only 8 metres from the house. 4 Byron Avenue properties would have their gardens shadowed from the sunny southwest by a 2.4 metre high wall, and for numbers 92 and 94, this rises to 3.7 metres, which is more than 12 feet. The proposed bin collection point would provide a handy step over the wall to Cobham Avenue for the noisy late-night drunks who currently only occasionally attempt to climb over it. The loss of the garages will impact upon the already dire parking situation in Barnes End. A resident has said in a letter of objection that Barnes End residents have been denied use of the garages. Another Barnes End resident has spoken to 11 other residents on this. Of these, 2 have tried in the past to rent a garage, and 8 of the 11 said they would be interested in renting a garage if the conditions were acceptable. The low usage figures in the developer's planning statement are therefore not a credible way to assess genuine demand for these garages. The turning circle in Barnes End is always full of parked cars and thus unusable. The bin lorry already has to be a reduced size and reverses all the way down the extremely narrow road space. Emergency vehicles would find it very difficult to reach properties at the end of the road. This prefab-looking brick hutch would be an intolerable intrusion on the visual and practical amenities of all nearby residents. Please refuse to grant the permission.
Thank you. Gail Henderson, please.
Good evening. My name is Gail Henderson and I reside at 85 Cobham Avenue, and I'm representing my family, the residents of Cobham Avenue, Barnes End and Byron Road, who are all directly impacted and who all opposed us. The developer's planning statement is based on an inaccuracy in that Barnes End consists of 55 masonette configurations and not 26 semi-detached properties with no off-street parking. Barnes End is 4.85 metres wide curb to curb. This narrows to 2.95 metres due to cars being parked on one side and it has bollards on the other. The road itself reduces at the end. Access is further hindered to commercial vehicles due to the bend at the entry of the road. There is also a breach of fire safety regulations under the building regulations, which states that fire vehicles are required to have a width of about 3.6 metres for access. At the cul-de-sac at the end of the road, the space is used as a turning area. It also leads to the drive to the garages, which is only 2.7 metres wide and runs along a perimeter fence. Given the density of Barnes End in terms of residents, any delay for a fire tender could endanger lives, not just in the bungalow, but in Barnes End and the surrounding roads. PE 15 requires development to ensure that the living conditions of existing residents are not diminished by increased noise or disturbance. It's hard to envisage how construction, traffic and plant would access the site without causing major issues. Barnes End is unsuitable for large vehicles and damage to property is of a concern. Outdoor areas are also likely to cause noise due to close proximity and will cause an overall loss of amenity and privacy. The access road is not lit and additional lighting will create further intrusion to 55 and 53 Barnes End. We ask that this planning application is refused.
Jonathan Hill, please.
Thank you. Members, yet before you a scheme that will deliver one new high-quality home for the borough which will help the council to meet its strategic policy objectives. The designers of the home have been given careful consideration to ensure that it responds to the surrounding context in terms of mass, height, materials and architecture. This includes a many proposal to a single-storey dwelling in line with officer comments. The home is generous in size and exceeds London plan standards for accommodation. Car parking will be provided off street in front of the home and will not impact on-street car parking. In developing the proposals, the project team has been mindful throughout the important relationship between the new homes and the existing housing in the immediate surroundings. The proposed unit is orientated at the front and rear outlets of the property to avoid direct overlooking into surrounding properties. Furthermore, as the proposed home is a single storey, there will be no overlooking from the first floor window. The proposed development will not result in a reduction in the amount of daylight or sunlight existing residents receive. The massing of the proposed unit has been carefully considered to ensure that the unit does not appear overbearing. Using flat roofs and tree planting will also help to screen the unit from surrounding views. The applicant has also acknowledged the loss of existing garages. However, these are now very run down, not secure, have minimal natural surveillance, and do not make the best use of the land in this urban location. The garages are let independently by the site owner, and surveys undertaken in 2017 which showed the garages are mainly let for personal storage. Only one garage is currently used for daily car use. The proposed development will remove the garages and bring activity to the site, improving its safety and appearance. The proposal has been designed to meet the latest sustainability standards with an energy-efficient building fabric, photovoltaic panels, green roofs and sustainable drainage. As noted by officers, the proposal has been meaningfully amended at various points throughout the planning process to address neighbour and officer comments. Overall, this is a scheme that provides planning benefits and has been through an iterative design process with officers to ensure its acceptability in light of the planning policy and other relevant material considerations. We therefore request that members approve the application in line with officer recommendation. Thank you.
In terms of the design style, similar to the last application, in terms of public viewpoints, very restricted. It's a modern style, doesn't necessarily absolutely interact with the other buildings in the area, which are all 2 stories, it's single story itself. But in terms of what we see, in terms of the architecture that's been utilised here, it's perfectly acceptable at single story level. In terms of privacy, the overlooking has been mentioned. It's single story. I think it's clear there's going to be many intervening fences, etc., surrounding other properties, and in any event, if you look at the mutual overlooking between all the properties from first floor these properties, it's certainly not the case that a single story property would afford a great deal of overlooking to neighbouring properties over fences and maybe up to second floor windows, but clearly that's not the usual overlooking we're looking at. The fire vehicle issue was mentioned. As I said, it's very similar to the previous application. If you look at the actual, I'll go back to the actual cul-de-sac, the distances are very similar. It's a building control matter in terms of fire brigade. Turning area was mentioned, it's been blocked up. There is actually a turning area further down the road as well, which can be utilised. You can just see part of it there, and if we go back to the ice with them, you can see it clearly. Noise disturbance, it's a residential property, and amongst other residential properties there will be mutual disturbance from people living there. In terms of construction vehicles, yes, there will be disturbance when it's being built, but as we all know, builders do tend to get on the buildings eventually, and that will stop eventually. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Berghoff. I'm so sorry. That's a Julian son.
Thank you, Chair. Our residents have expressed their objections very well. This is yet another infill application trying to squeeze as much as possible into a very small site. Originally, this application was for a 2-storey house. Unfortunately, the planning officer managed to persuade the developer that a bungalow would be more acceptable, which is interesting in view of an application that is coming up shortly on this agenda in Cannon Close on an even smaller site than this one. However, back to this application. So we have in front of us a bungalow that can only be described as ugly and reminds many of a nuclear bunker. And will also be right on the fence of Mrs. Henderson's house, which I consider to be intrusive. I would like to make reference to the very glaring error in the report that makes reference to the property in Barnes End being 26 semi-detached houses, which is found on page 5, introduction, paragraph 1.5 from the Fairmiles Homes planning statement, when there are in fact 55 masonettes. I find an error like this unacceptable and misleading. This of course means that the parking issues in this road are even greater than we are led to believe. I would also like to question the fact that it will be very difficult, not impossible, for a fire engine to get near this bungalow. I questioned the transport officer's report as no information regarding this question was included, and it was established that indeed a fire engine could not get near this house or the property and would have to rely on the use of a fire hydrant. But nobody seems to know where the nearest fire hydrant is. A very important consideration, I would say. Just to sum up, I do believe that this application should be refused. It is ugly and not in keeping with the rest of the properties. It's simply not good enough to be told that a new development must be in keeping with the surrounding houses on the street scene. But if it's tucked away, then only the residents have to look at it. It seems to be acceptable. I think not. As the Merton Sites and Policies Plan says, that this plan is for the people who live and work here. So that would include everybody, whether they are fronting a street scene or otherwise. Please give this report sensible consideration. It's dangerous and should be refused. Thank you.
Just very briefly, Chair, I visit properties and I do concur that it's actually flats in the Broads Barnes area itself. In terms of the fire brigade, it is a building control matter. If there is no fire hydrant and one is required, we don't think it is in this particular case, we'll be able to develop to put one in. They'd have to put one in themselves and then it can be utilised. But in this particular case, in terms of distances, they should be able to put any fire out through because it's reasonably close to where the engine can actually park at the end of Barnes End.
Councillor.
This business about the fire engine. In the previous application, we were told the width of the road was 2.7 metres. I'm assuming that will probably be the same for this application. 2.7 metres in old measurements is 8 foot 9 inches. I don't believe a fire engine is that wide. So I'm just now a bit confused as to why we're saying fire engines can't get down there. I'd just like some clarity on that, please.
So just to be clear, we weren't saying that fire engines can't get down the other one either. It's a case of they don't have to. The building control would require there to be a fire hydrant if there was a certain distance involved. In this case, my understanding is it's within 40 metres, therefore they can use the hoses. They can literally park at the end of the road, unload the hoses and put the fire out that way by walking down the street, which is not unusual. In large houses, you still have to do that quite often when you can't get up driveways.
Any other questions?
Quick one, amenity space. Is that amenity space to the southeast of the building? And how much is it?
Yes, if you look at the little arrow there, it's that large space there. It looks like it's split into two, but it's not. And obviously you do have extra amenity space in the property as well, small amount.
Comments? Councillor Jenner.
I just observe that during the considerable time I've been on the gritty, we've had umpteen applications for building on routes of garages, routes back on backland sites. And although certainly is showing shoehorning new housing, we're going to have to continue to shoehorn it in if we're to avoid building, if we're going to meet housing needs while avoiding building on green sites. So I think we have to accept this sort of application.
Any other comments? Councillor Sutherland.
Yeah, Councillor Jones is right, of course, but it is bungalow. Just looking at, well, thinking about living with walls around me varying between 2.4 and 3.7 metres in height, and narrow windows, and all of this has been done, of course, to meet the objectives of neighbours, but we don't often think about the living conditions for people who we're inviting to come and live here. And we do ask that they have adequate levels of privacy, sunlight, daylight, and quality of living conditions. So I'm not sure whether this delivers that. I do need some reassurance, I think, that in particular the lighting is adequate, and also it's really a case here of more being overlooked than overlooking, isn't it? I don't think I want to live there, but I'm not sure.
Just taking you through the plan, you'll see there's quite a number of roof lights on the tops. There's quite a lot of light coming in on top of the building. And also, if you look at the windows on the sides, there's quite more than actually you probably realise looking at the elevations. There's a corner window there, quite a large window there. Internal aspects here don't necessarily require windows, but I can't quite read that. I'm assuming that's all the suites there, bedroom there. So there is quite a lot of light coming into the building. I think it's perfectly acceptable.
One last comment. I mean, I agree with Councillor Jones. I don't see how we can turn it down, but I'd like to think we could. I do think it's unattractive and hostile, and it would be nice to think that they would maybe go to one bedroom. And I don't think we can get away with that, but I mean, it has been shoehorned in, and I just think it's a shame. I'm sure I'm going to approve it.
I'll move to the vote then. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Not voting. Oh, one against and one not voting? Three. Can we start again? Those in favour? Gosh, you've got very muddled there. Those against? Those not voting? 2. Okay, the application is approved. We then move to agenda item 8, which is 7A, Cannon Close, Rains Park, but I think it's 7B actually. It had a B on it when I went there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies if it is 7B. I didn't spot that on the door when I went out of the look. And the application is for a first floor and 2-storey side extension. This is the plot at the southern end of the cul-de-sac here. You see it's quite a generous plot compared to the neighbours. See some photographs, you'll see a single-storey building on the property. You'll also see quite a bit of foliage and trees around the site as well, which is existing, and quite a bit of that's to be retained, some to be removed. Surrounded by 2-storey buildings. There's the actual single-storey house as it stands at the moment. You'll see some of the views to neighbouring properties through these photographs. That's the shed at the bottom of the garden. Again, views of the neighbouring properties. This is at the rear of the single-storey property now. And this is a view to the front. So you'll see the main road on Cannon Close is characterised by terrace 2-storey properties. Unfortunately, we don't actually have a photograph for some reason of the front of the property, which pretty sure it is an environmental. So it's out of character in that context of the neighbouring properties. If we run through the extensions are the 2-storey side extension and obviously the extra storey on top of the building. Probably best to show that. The elevations. Let me just check. I think we've got an existing elevation and a proposed house actually on these plans. You can see the outline, I believe, in red of the existing one. I don't quite think that's accurate. Oh, there we are. Yes, you can just see it. If you follow that line there, you get an impression of the up here, the front elevation. See it's all built like this, up to here, across there, and down. So clearly, we've got this extra storey encompassing the roof void that exists already. 2-storey side extension. On the side, the windows have been designed to ensure that there isn't significant overlooking into neighbours. You'll see these windows at a high level at the rear of the property. If we go to the side, again, high level window here, which overlooks a neighbouring garden. Whereas this particular window is quite large and it's not obscure glazed, and I'll show you why. This is considered to be acceptable in the context of the plot because actually it's here on the property and it overlooks down the garden rather than neighbouring properties. And you can probably see that a little bit clearer from this plan. So this particular window is proposed about here, an extension overlooking the garden itself. So it's been very carefully looked at by officers. There's been some setbacks away from the neighbour at first floor level here to ensure there isn't the impact on the neighbouring residential dwelling here. All the windows have been assessed very carefully. It's now in context, being 2 stories, the same as the neighbours, and in every other respect considered to be acceptable and therefore recommended for review.
Thank you. Richard Williams. Is that time first, but is it Rose Lambert that's speaking first? Okay.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Rose Lambert and I've lived in Berrylands for 8 years. The eastern wall of the bungalow faces my back garden. I've been asked to speak on behalf of neighbours at both Cannon Close and Berrylands who object to this development. The existing bungalow was built many years after the development of the surrounding properties and originally formed part of what used to be a tennis court. The land was sold off in parts to adjoining householders and now forms part of the gardens adjoining the bungalow, including mine. The bungalow, which is in essence a backland development itself, was built on a small strip of this land and was clearly limited in size and height to suit the small plot size and to limit the impact of a new property on the existing surrounding houses. This would have been important at the time due to its unusual location, and it seems questionable whether it would have been permitted at all today, given the Council's policies concerning backland development. The conditions originally imposed must be maintained so that the use and enjoyment and the amenity of our properties is not negatively affected. There is no objection to refurbishing the existing bungalow to make it more aesthetically appealing, but the height must be limited to its existing height in order to protect the use and enjoyment of our homes. The eastern side of the proposed first floor and side extension will directly overlook the back of the houses in Berrylands. In particular, numbers 4, 5, 6 and 7 will be severely adversely affected. It will overlook our gardens, and this loss of privacy will affect the amenity and use of our properties and impact negatively on our privacy and family life. The full-size windows, 3 metres high by 2 metres wide to the east, would be extremely intrusive and are not in keeping with the windows in any other of the surrounding houses. The development will also require the removal of trees, which currently provide privacy for the houses in Berrylands. The development would result in extensive loss of privacy for the houses in Cannon Close, specifically numbers 7 and 8. In particular, the windows on the first floor would directly face number 7 on the west side and number 8 on the east side. On the west side, the first floor windows would be only 9 metres from and would directly overlook the master bedroom and living room of number 7. On the east side, the first floor windows are only 9 metres from and would also overlook the master bedroom of number 8. However, despite the extent of the intrusion, there are no restrictions on the size of the windows, their height, or whether there must be obscured glass, although the 7th floor windows are restricted. The scale of the extended footprint is far too big for the plot, which was an infill backland development and never intended to provide for such a large dwelling. None of the surrounding houses, even those that have been extended, are as large as the proposed extension. It is almost double in volume of the existing property. The proposed application is not, therefore, in keeping with the existing surrounding houses. It is overbearing and out of character. On behalf of all of the affected neighbours, I strongly urge you to reject this application.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Richard Williams and I'm speaking on behalf of my parents and younger sister who live at 13 Heath Drive and will face a 35-metre square, almost windowless wall at first floor level that will be within 2 to 3 metres of the outbuildings at the end of the garden. And this is a view shared with the other residents on Heath Drive who face a similar possibility, including the residents at 11 who have a similar outbuilding. Concerns have also been raised by neighbours from Cannon Close, Berrylands and Heath Drive about the challenges of the size and scale of this for the size of the site. As has been said, this was formerly a tennis court, and I would suggest to the committee if you were facing a proposal to seek permission for a 2-storey property on a tennis court site as infill for this, that officers would have sought the same concessions that they sought on the previous application. It is simply too large and too much massive and overbearing for the site. And even as the report notes at section 7.5, overlooking is a potential issue. This would be twice the size of the existing property and have a much larger footprint than neighbouring properties. So this is a poor proposal for a property that would be too large, too overbearing, blocking sightlines, leaving some neighbours loomed over by solid walls like an iceberg over an Arctic village, and others loomed over by large windows. Obviously I understand that that is not sufficient in itself to reject, for the Committee on Planning Grants to reject. So I would suggest that the core planning strategy, CS4 for the Rose Park sub-area, says that developments must respect local character and amenity. Given that this is an area that these roads are play properties, this is a much larger house and a much larger, despite the comments that are made on this and how the property would be finished. CS14 says that all developments need to be designed in order to respect, reinforce and enforce the local character of the area. This again would be a much larger and intrusive backfill site that would not meet that test. Similarly, sites policy DND3 talks about form, scale, bulk, proportions and respecting of space, and DND2 talks about relate positively and appropriately to the siting, rhythm, scale, density, proportions, height, materials and massing, and not create visual intrusion. This is an overdevelopment for this site. My personal view is that if this were empty at the time and the permission was being sought for a bungalow, the committee would have a challenging balance between providing new housing and the scale, but given this is to take an existing property, double it in size, that would be significantly larger than the other properties on Cannon Close, I respectfully ask the councillors on the committee to refuse permission for this.
Simon Sandy Kolchak. Is that how you say your name? Next door's Kate.
Good evening. My name is Saman Zadeh Kolchak. I'm architectural designer, architectural and planning consultant and design first floor. I would like to point out that the first floor has been carefully designed to not be overlooking the other properties. And as you can see on the drawings, none of the windows are facing there's no window that is facing the neighbouring properties, and the windows that are facing the neighbouring properties or may be overlooking the all above 1.7 metre. The other thing is about saying that the plot will be too large on the site. The site is 410 square metres. The current building on the site is 76 square metres, and the addition is about 14 square metres. So what we have is would be a building with a 90 square metre footprint on a 410 square metre site, which is less than 25% of the site currently. Heath Drive. The building does not overshadow any of the buildings on Heath Drive. And furthermore, there are trees on the boundary between 7A Cannon Close and the buildings on Heath Drive. So we could also see in the pictures that because of the trees that are over here, there won't be any visible intrusion to numbers 11 to 15 Heath Drive. Buildings on Marylands Road. They're approximately 43 meters away from the development. And this distance is much more than the distance from the current buildings, which are like number 7, 9 and 5 on Cannon Close, which are much nearer to buildings on Marylands Way. And 43 meters is I think is a very distant, so there won't be any intrusion, visible intrusion to those properties on Cannon Drive, on Marylands Road. The current dwelling is a single-story bungalow, as you all saw over there, and the addition of that of the first floor is the height of the first floor will be exactly the same height as the other buildings on Cannon Drive. So that would make it more in keeping with the buildings on Cannon Close. And so I think that's all I need to say about this.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to remind you,
Okay.
I just really wanted to pick up on 3 points on submissions that people have already made. As far as I recollect, at the bottom of Mr. Williams's garden, I can't recall any trees there that would protect him from this awful view that he might perceive. Secondly, I'm really upset that there's no photograph of the actual existing bungalow to be shown, because I think if you saw it, the members would actually see that the proposed building is absolutely enormous and completely overbearing to the street scene in Camden Close. And secondly, the developer said that the distance between number 9, 8 and 7, number 7, number 8, number 9, he's measured the difference as being a lot shorter, and I actually don't think he's correct, so I'd like that re-measured. So, off we go. Thank you, Chair. I think our residents have voiced their concerns in a justified manner. There are real issues here, and some of them need to be repeated to show how unacceptable this application is. I expect you will all be familiar with the phrase, you can't fit a quart into a pint pot, and this is what I think the developer is trying to do, and not really giving any consideration to the surrounding neighbours. Just as an example, I refer to the Merton Site and Policies Plan, where our councillor judge writes a forward. In this document, he says something like, the plan is written for people who live here and work here, so that with that I read into any resident should not be unduly affected by a planning application that gives them huge concerns. It also stresses the importance of good planning for residents and the impact on them. In addition, the aim of this document is to improve the local environment and street scene. Quite clearly, this report does none of this. The building is huge and overbearing, and even if you look at the report at 7.5, it actually says, windows at first floor level may give rise to an overlooking potential and loss of privacy to adjacent properties. So there you are, it says it. Indeed, it does especially at numbers 6, 8 and 9, and of course, and I believe the family at number 7 will be severely overlooked in their master bedroom in their living room, since the only light coming into the living room is via the window facing east, and the distance between the proposed house and the window at number 7, when measured, is a lot nearer than measured by the council's planning department. I would also like confirmation whether this new build constitutes more than 50% of the total size of the garden, including back and front. And I believe the developer said it was 75, I don't believe that. I suspect it does. Oh.
I'm speaking against this planning application on behalf of local residents, as you've heard their concerns. I too would like to stress how large and overbearing this proposed house is. I'd like to give a little bit more information about this small close. The beginning of the close has a doctor's surgery at the corner where it links with Grand Drive. Quite often cars will arrive with patients, and occasionally it may be necessary for an ambulance to be called that will block the road. In addition, one can frequently see large lorries such as supermarket and Amazon deliveries. Goodness knows what would happen if fire engines needed to enter the close as well. It's very, very narrow. The proposed property does not allow for any off-street parking. It's not clear from this report whether this house is for single-family occupancy. If not, it should be. I.e., this dwelling was turned into flats. There would be no space for additional parking on either the property or the road. Even if the current proposals were approved, then there would be a potential for 4 additional cars parked on the road, and for the reasons already noted, it would be totally unacceptable. Finally, I'd like to reiterate the views made by the residents. This plot is a small piece of land in a narrow road. When planning was originally sought all those years ago, it was stated by the planning department that only a bungalow could be built because that was all the size of the plot was suited for. So what has changed in the intervening years? The road has got busier with more cars and larger vehicles. The plot is still the same size, the trees are bigger, and if this application is approved, the trees offering privacy to surrounding neighbours would need to be felled. The plot was only suitable for a bungalow when it was first built. Nothing has changed, so it is only suitable for a bungalow now. Please refuse this planning application. We've got time. Just one other point I'd like to have clarified is that it came to my attention that a retirement management company issue. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of clarifications on the site. Just to be clear, in terms of the design of the building, the windows, you'll see this is the front elevation facing the cul-de-sac, so it's perfectly acceptable under normal circumstances to have windows facing the outside in terms of the road. And you might have some potential overlooking neighbouring properties, but of course that's mutual. The rear of the property, you have these upper-level windows, 1.7 metre high, and they can't overlook the neighbouring properties, obviously they're too high. This particular side, again, high-level windows. The only window that potentially could really overlook is this one, which I said right in the introduction. It does potentially overlook neighbouring properties, and the report is quite candid in the fact that that would be the case. But if we go back to the OS plan, and these measurements were given by the applicants and objectors, if we look at the property in Berrylands here, the applicant mentioned 43 metres. We measured at 40. It's not entirely accurate to the size of the lines, but it's at least 40 metres. So this is the window here we're talking about. It's not there. It's slightly further down the garden because it's at the end of the two-storey extension. So it's that particular window from about that level to the properties here, which would be not 43, probably about 40. I would say now, under normal circumstances, 20 is acceptable in terms of window to window in residential properties. So the properties to the south was also mentioned potential overlooking there. Well, I already showed you the south elevation. It's high-level windows. So in other words, there is no overlooking that way. We go to the other side elevation. Again, it's a high-level windows. The only window we're talking about here is that particular window. It's distance of 40 metres, so we consider that to be perfectly acceptable for a normal residential situation. It's mentioned that it's larger than other properties in the street. Clearly what's being proposed is a larger property, but if you actually look at photographs of the street, you have large terrace buildings. They're not individually, they're not houses, yes, but they're actually conjoined, so you actually have very large terraces, so it's still be a detached house within a terrace street. 50% of the garden was mentioned. This isn't a new development, it's not a new house. We have policies in terms of size of gardens for new houses, but in this particular case, clearly the existing garden, which would be reduced in size slightly, but you still have a significant amount left over that would quite easily qualify in terms of the 50 square metres that would be required normally under that policy if it were a new house. Car parking, well, you can see from photographs that there is already car parking available on the front of the site, and that's to be expected.
Questions? No questions? Yeah, Councillor Fee.
Just a query. The applicant said that the development only covers 25% of the plot, and we have the objectors and council saying it's a lot larger. So if you could just let me know, or could the officer let me know, which one is it?
Looks like around about closer to 25 and 50% to me. There's the plot, you can extrapolate that yourself. The actual, there's the building, and the plot extends to that. So I would say that would fit in that and that. Half from the front, I would say 25 to 30% personally would be the plot coverage of that, including the new extensions. It's a guesstimate, but it's probably, you can see for yourself and come to your own conclusions.
Did you want to speak? No. Anybody else with a question? Okay, comments please. No comments? Then we move to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Not voting? One person, the application is approved. Now move on to agenda item 10, which is the Grange. 24 the Grange.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is located on the south-western side of the Grange Road, which lies within the Wimbledon West Conservation Area. The site comprises a detached two-storey dwelling, which is a locally listed building, with associated outbuildings and outdoor meeting space, including a building known as 24A. The site surroundings comprise residential dwellings and spacious plots. The application itself is for extensions or alterations to the existing dwelling, which includes single-storey rear extension, two-storey side extension to link with 24A and amalgamate this building with number 24, the application dwelling. Single-storey side extension for demolition of existing detached garage and roof extension including new door windows. The project also includes a basement which will cover the footprint of the existing dwelling and beyond under the proposed single-storey side extension of the south-east elevation. Run members through the plans. So this is the existing footprint. That's the main dwelling there. There is this building here known as 24A. The proposal is to link to that building and amalgamate it into one dwelling. It does have a certificate of lawfulness approved on that dwelling as an independent C3 dwelling. And so the proposal does include technically a loss of a residential unit, but we have addressed that in the relevant section of the report. The building is locally listed. I'll just go through the existing elevations. So it's the front of the dwelling is here. That's what's known as 24A. It's an old coach house linked to the dwelling. There's also a more modern garage here to the side. The garage is proposed to be demolished. Again, looking at the back here. This is the proposed block plan. So as I said, extensions and alterations to the property. Linking to that building here, extending out the back here. This is the proposed basement plan. It has been amended during the course of the application. It did have basement extending up to the boundary edge on the right here, but that has now been amended. It's under the existing footprint of the dwelling, apart from coming out the side here, which is under the proposed side extension. This is the proposed ground floor plan. On the plan you can see some of the existing walls which are to be removed. Proposed first floor plan. This two-storey side extension is this extension here, linking to that building. And the proposed roof plan here. In terms of proposed elevations, so this is the elevation at the front of the road. There's a two-storey side extension there, linking to the dwelling. We say two-storey, it's sort of 1.5 storey in a way, with the ridge height actually at the eaves height of the main property. The single-storey side extension here. The roof extension, it is proposed to take the roof off and extend it sideways so the single ridge will become a crown flat rooftop. And at the back, single-storey extensions here. First floor windows here. And that's the new the basement to the side under the extension. Running to the site photographs. This is at the back. The property, as far as I understand, is actually empty at the moment. Looking to the side, that's the existing coach house, 24A that we're linked to, so essentially the roof will come across here, extending out here as well. That's the garage to be removed, and a new single-storey extension proposed. Again, that's the garage there to be removed. And that's really just view from the road. So it's clearly a distinctive building in the road. Surrounding area is characterised by detached properties, some historic age. The main features of the building are to be retained, such as the chimney and the front windows and entrance. So overall, Chair, officers consider the proposal to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area and not cause material harm to neighbouring community. Appropriate planning has been recommended as a recommendation to grant permission. Thank you.
Michael O'Connell, please.
My name is Michael O'Connell. I live at number 25 Grange, adjacent to number 24. Council has maintained the Grange as one of the best conserved streets in the area, with houses retaining their original Edwardian facades. Council's own environmental report concludes that this is due to its cohesion and the architectural quality of the buildings, 17 locally listed. I argue that this application does not adhere to council policy to respect space between buildings where they contribute to the character of the area. It is an overdevelopment in scope and arrangement. Linking the coach house to the main house and building an extension to the east adds to loss of void spaces in between, as seen in the photos I have submitted. The proposed facade will cover the entire frontage bar 1 metre and will not improve the street scene, and we are a street very much used by the public. The coach house is built to a different scale to the main building. The planning department report states that the existing gap between the buildings is already partially screened by high fencing. This temporary fencing was erected by the new owners. I maintain the link proposed will be visible, however set back, because it is 2 stories high with a large window facing the street. This application, if approved, will have a shocking impact on myself and my house. The rear of the coach house will be extended by 5 metres in order to accommodate number 24's ground floor link extension. The extension will be built on the shared boundary line. I have submitted photos of before and after to give you some idea of the impact of a solid wall 6 to 4.5 metres high rearing over the back of my house, a visual intrusion that will block a lot of daylight from my kitchen and living room. I therefore have to challenge the planner's report that this extension will not affect neighbourhood amenity because, and I quote, it is of limited depth and follows largely the footprint of existing building and structures. Those buildings and structures are sheds and outbuildings and do not compare in height and bulk. Please turn down this application to create a 34-room house. Thank you.
Jane Fairbrother, please.
My name is Jane Fairbrother and I have lived in the Grange for 23 years. My house is next door to number 24. I'm disappointed that the planning officer's recommendation is to grant planning permission. 15 letters of objection were submitted, raising many concerns. However, only one has been addressed, resulting in a small reduction to the size of the basement. Despite assurances to the contrary, I remain concerned about the impact on the water table and the risk of flooding. Number 24 is already a very large house. Pre-planned redevelopment is far too big, occupying all but 1 metre of the width of the plot and filling the gap between 24 and 24A. The single-storey extension on the east side, at a height of 5.5 metres, is double the height of the garage that it replaces and will not be partially screened from number 23 by existing trees, as stated in 7.9. Under a separate application executed just 1 day before this application was submitted, 7 mature trees were removed from number 24. Timing could not have been a coincidence and cannot be denied, as several trees feature on the garden plan marked to be removed. 5 bleached lime trees formed the boundary to my back garden, which has lost all of its privacy and is now exposed to the south and west facing windows, with an additional dormer window proposed on the 2nd floor. Removal of the trees should have been part of this planning application. Question 7 on the application form asks, will any trees or hedges need to be removed in order to carry out your proposal? And the true answer should have been yes. I'm annoyed by the devious manner in which these 2 applications were separated. The front building line on 24A should not be brought forward, as this will cause loss of light to the front of number 25. The worst aspect of the proposal is the rear extension to the party wall, which will cause massive loss of light to number 25 and should not be allowed. Residents of the Grange have lived through a succession of major building projects, each taking years to complete, basements cause so much disruption, vibration, noise, pollution and mess, and the scale of this one is enormous. The effect on the health and well-being of local residents should not be disregarded. Thank you.
David Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you heard from your officer, the application property is located in the Grange. It's a two-storey detached house with a small basement and a coach house. The property sits on a large plot, and the proposal is to extend the rear together with a single-storey link between the house and the coach house. Underneath the house will be a basement set in from site boundaries. Conservation area appraisal shows the main house linked to the coach house, which refers to it as a granny annex. The buildings identified in the conservation area appraisal as having a negative effect on the character of the conservation area due to the loss of the walk, parking and other negative features to the front. There's been a number of objections regarding this plan application. Regarding the basement, this element of the scheme has been amended since the application was submitted and is fully contained within the building's footprint and would be 4 metres away from the nearest building. The basement would not be visible from the street, and the light well being located to the rear of the property. The application was accompanied by a basement impact assessment undertaken by qualified engineers to conclude that in terms of flooding, the structural proposal is acceptable. In terms of trees, the proposal does not propose any loss of trees. Instead, the frontage of the property, which was noted earlier, has been identified in the conservation area statement as a negative streetscape due to the hard tarmac would be landscaped and additional trees added. Whilst the coach house itself is self-contained, the entrance is behind a continuous timber fence and next to a rear door of the main house. Therefore, whilst technically it could be occupied as a separate unit, it's always been in the same ownership as the main house, seen as an ancillary and part of the main property. There's currently a plastic canopy which is attached to the coach house, which is behind a timber fence aligned with the front of the property connecting the two. It's proposed to remove these unsympathetic elements, providing a more appropriate single-storey structure nearly 5 metres back from the front elevation to ensure that it's not seen as a continuous frontage. In designing the extension, careful consideration has been given to neighbouring properties, with the rear extension being less than 2 metres past the rear elevation of the neighbouring property. Features such as the hall and landing window on the eastern elevation will remain in place. The alterations proposed are in character with the house and the street. All features would remain and the negative frontage will be enhanced. The Conservation Officer has no objections to the application. The Tree Officer has no objections, and pre-commencement conditions require submission of a basement construction methods statement, drainage details and landscaping. All neighbourly matters will be dealt with through building regulations and party wall discussions. As such, we ask members to approve the plan application.
Thank you, Chair. Just pick up some points. In terms of the space between the buildings, I'll just go to the proposed front elevation. The key reason officers have come down in favour of the application in terms of the extension of operations is because of the largely single-storey appearance. So it's acknowledged this one is technically 2-storey, but the actual ridge height is below the eaves height of the main house. So the main house itself still retains as being dominant building in the street scene. So on the floor plan it shows this is set back. To the side, it's single-storey as well. So in terms of spaciousness, it does leave the space at 2-storey in the street scene, and we think that is respected. Linking to the coach house, as I said earlier, we think it's done in a sympathetic way. In terms of the impact on the neighbouring amenity at the rear, looking at this closely, there's some buildings there, albeit of lower height. In terms of the side elevation, it is largely evidence here, but in taking into account the distance to neighbouring windows, although it is on the boundary, it is single-storey, and so we have determined it is not harmful. In terms of risk of flooding, we do have the submitted flood risk assessment and basement impact assessment. The construction statement has been reviewed by our flood risk engineer. He's happy with it and recommended appropriate condition. I have seen the photo montages that third party has submitted to members yesterday, and one of them showed the height of the building being quite a lot higher than the existing. On plan, it is to be the same height, ridge height as existing. The angle of the roof pitch is coming away to create the flat roof top. So just to confirm that. And also it does acknowledge there are some trees that have been removed which have exposed windows overlooking. Whilst it's regrettable, we turn the application on in terms of the plans, and the additional windows are not causing additional harm where that exists. So, thank you,
Councillor
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the challenges of speaking twice in the evening is I've exhausted most of my rhetorical flourishes. But I would still say that I have really substantial misgivings about this application, and I think the report of the officers significantly underestimates the scale of the mass and bulking of this property. So I think there's a clear breach of a number of planning guidelines around bulk and massing, both the scale and loss of space, the design within the conservation area, and the loss of neighbourhood amenity. And I would challenge the officers' conclusions and would reject this application on the basis of DMD2, DMD4, London Plan 7.4 and loss of amenity. This property is within a conservation area. I think we'd all acknowledge that the purpose of a conservation area is to conserve, not to preserve, the architectural heritage. Both the buildings within that conservation area, but also the spaces between those buildings which set the rhythm and cadence of the street scene. The Grange has been fortunate over the years that despite a number of extensions and developments, thanks to good decisions by former planning committees and officers, the quality of the street scene has been preserved with the original Edwardian facades. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of this application. The proposed house does not adhere to the conservation policy of the council. No longer two separate houses on the site, the main house and the coach house. The facade will be one massive building across the frontage with only a metre gap on the side. This will be detrimental to the street scene because of the loss of space between the buildings. Also, the coach house should be kept as a separate dwelling as originally designed, part of the heritage of this conservation area. And this design is of a completely different scale to number 24. Despite the argument to the contrary, the proposed link will be visible from the street, in spite of being set back. It is 2-storey high, I think, on balance, despite it being somewhat, the top, a fraction below the building line. It is still clearly from those pictures 2-storey high, with a window facing the street. And it cannot be said that the fencing has always partially obscured the gap, because the fencing was only a recent temporary measure. The development is being extended in nearly every direction possible. The rear extension of the coach house will have a terrible impact on the amenity of number 25. The wall will be extended 5 metres along a shared boundary line and beyond number 25's rear extension. Thus, number 25 will look at a 4.5 metre high wall just 2 metres from their kitchen window. This creates a clear visual intrusion and loss of light, as has been illustrated from the photos. The planning report maintains that the extension does not affect neighbourhood amenity. I would challenge that conclusion. The exceptional coming to time, whilst we recognise the right of owners to extend the property, we must respect the conservation area through sensitivity and scale. This application fails this test. It's overdevelopment development, and I urge the committee to reject this application.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant made a statement that there's a construction of a small basement. Could the officer tell me what the footprint of the basement is and how that compares to the footprint of the house.
Yes, so this is the proposed basement plan. It follows the footprint of the existing house. These outer walls here, and at this point, this is underneath the proposed single-storey side extension. So, the majority of it is under the existing footprint on this bit here. I don't have the square meters to hand. It's clearly a large basement being underneath the entire footprint of the house and beyond, so I wouldn't say small there.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a few moments ago we were talking about the roof and the photo montage which I'm also looking at. Could you, I mean it really does look in that photograph that the roof is bigger, taller. Is it a new chimney? Because where's the view from the front? Really, that looks about the same type, the same height that chimney as the flat bit of the roof. Whereas, I saw it at the moment, the chimney appears to be much taller.
This plan, actually, if you look closely, the ridge is, you can just about see it through the chimney pots. That existing chimney at the front is to be retained. There, so on plan, I have measured it on plan, and it is to be the same height. So if the applicant builds it higher, and we get an enforcement complaint, then we can investigate that. But on plan, it is the same height.
In the montage that we've got, the chimney looks much taller than the roof. In the present building.
It is difficult. I think based on this angle, it is further forward than the pitch, so from this angle it does look a lot higher. Unfortunately, I don't have a shot from straight on.
Well, I won't leave you the point. It looks much bigger, but the whole house looks much bigger in pretty well every direction. There's also a lot of accommodation in that room and door windows. But we'll come back to that, I guess, when we're having comments.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Yeah, I think you might have answered part of the question going to ask. We seem to be a bit scarce on plans. We haven't got the front elevation here. Certainly haven't. So we've got the rear, and it's very difficult to sense how bulky and how much bigger this the extensions are, make the whole plot, the coverage of the plot, if you like, without the existing floor plans. Now, I think the officer said that the basement plan was actually the existing footprint of the house currently. Is that right?
Yes, plus going underneath the proposed single-storey side extension on the southeast elevation.
Yeah. But as I said, it would be easier for us to gauge, the size if we had the existing floor plans beside the proposed floor plans. In the future, perhaps.
Any other questions?
Big house needs a bigger plot, really. It's filling this plot, and the spaces between the buildings in large parts of North Wimbledon, but particularly in the Grange, are an important part of the attribute. that takes that away, let's say, completely. The new extension on the other side is much taller than the what was a small garage, and the roof is enormous, and the whole frontage just does dominate this site. The market scale is wrong, and well, let's hear what other people have to say, but I just think it's inappropriate, and the biggest mistake of all, I think, is the link between the coach house and the house. It really makes it look enormous, which it is.
Well, I've just been looking at page 109 in our bundle, which is the plan of the street, and we can see the hatching of the property that we're concerned with. But there seem to be several sites on buildings on that street which are perhaps as big as the building that is proposed. And the gaps between the properties vary enormously. Some of them are no gap at all. If you look across the street, there are 2 properties there without a gap. And then adjoining those are fairly narrow gaps. So there appears to be no standard gap and no standard property size in the Grange, looking at that. And I suppose there's a consideration of whether... Sorry? Well, the question is, because something is old and something has been there for a long time, does it mean it's unimprovable or unalterable? And that's certainly not the approach that previous generations took, as many buildings have been altered over the course of time. And certainly the officer's assessment is, which I tend to agree with, is that the style of these alterations is very much in keeping with the style of the original building. It's a bigger property. But is it a poorer design? Is it a different design? I don't think it is. So, yeah, at the moment I can't see a basis for refusing.
Any other comments?
My comment is that the basement is large. It's not a small basement. It's quite large, especially on the property adjacent to it, which would be quite near.
Because I think there's value in the quirkiness of the coach house on a standalone basis and the gap between that and the main house, and I think that's worth preserving, actually. There have been developments along the Grange, but it doesn't mean we want to allow another gap to close up between the properties. I think the other thought, of course, is that when we lose a dwelling unit like this, we don't seek any mitigation, do we? And yet, strictly, we are trying to at least preserve such houses, properties as we've got, or indeed adding to the rate of 400 every year. So.
Move something. We've got no other comments. Councillor Jones?
Well, it seems to me it's basically an aesthetic judgment as whether in a conservation area where we're entitled to impose stricter criteria than elsewhere, it's a question of whether we think the house looks better, house and the moat house look better without the gap or with the gap. On the whole, I think they look better without the gap. So I think we're trying to move refusal on those grounds. On the grounds that is inappropriate development, detrimental to the character of conservation.
So you wish to move a recommendation? Do you have? Yeah.
So just one point to make out. You'll see in the report the conservation area also has had a look at this particular development, just to point out, obviously your choice what you wish to do with the application, but there is no objection from the conservation officer to the proposal before you see.
Well, I think actually it isn't an aesthetic issue. It's one we're entitled to our own judgment.
Okay. We'll move to the vote. Do you want to put a recommendation? Move a recommendation. Yeah. You're going to
I
second?
think, I mean, we're talking bulk and mass here, and it is too big, and in this conservation area, the air is more valuable than the bricks.
Here.
Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. The recommendation from Philip. Repeat your recommendation, please.
Well, my recommendation was this was detrimental to the town conservation area. Councillor Pocock has helpfully added bulk and massing to this, and I'm sure the officers can make all this into a sensible form of words. So basically, it's a recommendation for refusal.
Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Those against? Not voting. Not voting. Then the recommendation is carried and the application is not approved. Agenda item 11, which is the Dog and Fox Public House.
Thank you, Chair. This is the site. It's the Dog and Fox Pub and Hotel in Wimbledon Village at the top of the hill. Here you can see the site plan and the extent of the area. I've used this set of photos first, just so you can get an idea of the building. This is obviously an aerial view. The main part of the building here, a flat roof area here, and then also a section there. The existing site plan, this is the main feature of the building, the Oriel Tower at the front. It's a part 3-storey, part single-storey, locally listed building. It currently has 17 hotel rooms with a pub and restaurant at ground floor level. This part of the building at ground floor level is currently a restaurant, which would be amalgamated into the pub floor space as part of the proposal. The conservation area assessment identifies this building as holding a key prominent position in the streetscape and well worth its local listing. It particularly mentions the Oriel Tower topped by a tented copper spire, and you can see that on the plan here. Just to take you through the photos, you'll probably be familiar with this view of it from the street. Here's the flat roof section I mentioned earlier, and then the main bulk of the building here. A view slightly further down the road. This is a view to the side of the building. You can see the stables, which I'll come on to in a moment back here. This is an access track effectively to those stables and residential dwellings beyond those stables. This is the access road looking back out towards the high street. Stables on the left here, and the housing in a gated development there beyond. Again, a view back towards the site. So this is the stables with the site in the background there and the access road. This is a view from the upper levels of the site looking back. Again, stables here, residential dwellings beyond. So that's not come out particularly well, but that is a view from the roof of the flat roof of the site looking towards number 5 Homefield Road. You can see the garden there and the main building here. Now this is a view looking from the garden of number 5 back up towards the hotel. This building over here is the stables. You can just make out the parapet wall of the application site beyond. This is from the upper levels of number 5, and this is the parapet wall here, which I can point out in the last picture. I'd ask members to note the presence of this larger section in close proximity to the neighbouring gardens, as that is a section that will be removed as part of the proposals. The site is within an archaeological priority zone, conservation area, primary shopping area and town centre. If I take you through the plans, this is the existing ground floor plan, Chinese restaurant here and the pub and hotel on this side. On the upper levels you'll see it's just this main section whereas this is all single story over here, single story but albeit quite high. That chunk on the corner that I pointed out earlier is this over here, so it's on top of that single story element, and it currently serves the restaurant below. Here you can see the existing elevations, the main part of the building here, the flat roof and those smaller those bits on the roof that I just mentioned before, and you can see that in the section drawing here as well. So that's adjacent to the garden with number 5. Taking you on to the proposal, this will be a key screen as it shows the entirety of the site. The main element is going to be the extension here to provide 12 additional hotel rooms. And the conversion of the neighbouring restaurant at ground floor level, so it will all become the restaurant and part of the Dog and Fox. There is going to be an internal lift providing access to these additional rooms. Extension to the rear here is part 3-storey, following on from this element of built form, and then here is single-storey. The green elements relate to ceiling roofs, the orange bits are solar panels, and the blue bits are the upper rooms, effectively, of the extension. This is the ground floor plan, which, in all fairness, has got a lot of detail on it, so you're not going to be able to pick up a lot of it, I don't think, from there. This is the first floor, and you can see the proposed rooms at that level. This is all new, and this is going to be plant, or to accommodate the new plant, which is currently on the roof. This is the next floor up, so you can see that this section here is lower than the section at the beginning. I will come on to the artist illustrations, which do assist with understanding the bulk and massing on this proposal. And there we have the roof plan. So you can see pitched roofs here, a crown flat roof here, and then flat roof at the back to accommodate the solar panels. Here we can see the Stark section joints showing the extension here with a glazed link to the main building. The rear of that view is this, effectively. And you can see the side elevations showing the extensions there also. Here we have sections, again showing the extensions. As I say, the artist illustrations may be more helpful to give an idea of how it's going to appear on site. Here you can see the glazed canopy, which will be erected to the front in place of the pagodas at the restaurant currently. Here's a view from the stables with the 3-storey extension and the single-storey extension here. It is intended that this wall is a louvered wall, which will enclose the plant machinery, which is currently open and on the roof. Here is the view from number 5 Grenfell Road, to the rear of the site. And this is another view taken from the document that the applicant has recently distributed. You can see the arrangement of roof forms. This is the existing flat roof of the restaurant. So you can see this section here that I mentioned earlier would be removed. This section here is set back from the rear of the building, and this would be an area for maintenance and emergency access only. It's not a roof terrace area. And then we have a 2-storey element here, which also provides hotel rooms. This is the canopy, and if I take us, I'll leave this on that one for now. There's been a number of objections relating to the visual impact on the locally used building conservation area, parking and congestion concerns, overlooking and disturbance to neighbouring properties, including the stables. And those are going to be some fairly key issues as we move into the merits. In terms of the visual impact, this is set out on page 125. I won't go through that in too much detail. Effectively, the degree of setback that we have is going to result in a fairly subordinate appearance, and we don't feel it's going to be overly dominant or compete with the main building for dominance. The glazed link, we think, has merits in terms of separating the main element of the building to this more subordinate element, and that is considered to be a suitable approach. In terms of neighbouring amenity, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the separation distances are such, due to that setting, that we don't consider that the impact on outlook will be any worse, and bearing in mind that that existing extension above the restaurant would be removed, which currently has quite an overbearing impact. The windows to the rear are angled bay windows, and these would be obscurely glazed to both of these panes, and only the window which looks towards the roof of the stables would be permitted to be clearly glazed, and that's to avoid overlooking to the neighbouring properties here. The construction phase is going to be quite key because of the proximity of the stables. If I show you on the site plan, the stables access the site through that access road, and it's required for access with riders on horses throughout the day. We have a construction management plan submitted which does touch on these issues. However, we feel there is still some way to go in terms of managing that construction, and so we have asked that, notwithstanding that submitted document, that we do have a revised construction management plan to take into account the impact specifically on horses. And you can see that in the list of conditions. In terms of drainage, you'll see that there is a comment in that to update the committee. The application as originally submitted achieved an 8% reduction in surface water runoff, and now London Plan policies indicate we should be aiming for a 50% reduction, but bear in mind that that would relate to new development in its entirety rather than a site like this which is already heavily built upon. The applicants have looked into this, they've looked into water attenuation methods, and they have been able to achieve a 12% reduction, which was well off that 50%. We think in this case that's probably as good as we can hope for with this, and it will reduce surface water runoff from what it is now, which is a critical point. Now, in terms of the highway impact, it does have a high public transport accessibility level. The parking surveys do indicate that there is capacity in the area if needed. Deliveries, because the restaurant will be combined with the Dog and Fox, that will give an opportunity to consolidate and reduce the number of deliveries overall. So the indication is 8 less deliveries per week. The increase in vehicle movements from these 12 additional rooms is not considered to be so significant as to warrant a refusal of planning permission in any way, and we do have a travel plan to be secured as part of the recommendation. Sustainability, the solar panels have been discreetly located so as not to interfere with key views of the listed building. The conclusion, therefore, is that the application is acceptable, subject to the conditions and the lead agreement for a travel plan as set out in the report.
Thank you. Carol Andrews, please.
I'm the owner of the Riding Stables, which is a major asset to the area and long-established business of over 37 years, with an excellent safety record. It's enjoyed not only by our riders, but also the many families that visit us throughout the year. We support many local charities, and the last year alone we raised over £55,000. Aside from my concerns about the size and scale of the development, I also question the need for it when it is clearly not operating at capacity at its current size. The developers were invited to discuss construction management and its effect on the operation of the stables in February 17. However, they only just produced the document when prompted by the council. In it, they have shown blatant disregard for horse welfare and human safety. Their dismissive statement about how horses will react is made with no knowledge of horse behaviour. It isn't just about the noise, but also vibrations and visual hazards too. It doesn't matter how a horse is bred, they will have the same natural instincts and reactions to fear. The plan is full of blasé assurances to say that on-site works will stop when horses are exiting and entering the stables. However, it contains no details to describe how this will be achieved in practice, nor does it mention the safety of staff working in the yard. Risk assessments addressing the added danger associated with construction disturbance need to be carried out on all activities which involve my instructors, clients or visitors being in contact with horses, and my vet and farrier, whose work is very skilled, need to be included in this. Does the timing of the construction plan allow for stoppages, which there will be many, to ensure our safety, or will they be working fast to reach a deadline? Deliveries to the site mean the high street may be held up for as long as 5 minutes. This will result in our horses being trapped in stationary traffic on their return to the stables. This increased time on the high street makes horses and riders more vulnerable and therefore under increased risk. We share our access with the office block next door as well as the residents of Homefield Place, and we already suffer from the noise and disruption from deliveries. The transport officer states most guests will arrive by taxi. There is no official drop-off point, so we can expect more taxis to block our access or stop on the Keep Clear sign as they do now. My planning consultant has found an undated memo on file from the Council's transport planner, which conflicts with the transport comments in the committee report. The memo concludes that officers are unable to provide any further comments until the above information is provided. This information is still outstanding. Despite the bedroom capacity being increased by 38%, which they call modest, I'm not sure it is, and a large function room being added, the applicant claims that servicing will decrease. How could this be possible? Unless no one's using it, of course. Council officers appear to have accepted the construction plan at face value, and while they have imposed further conditions relating to construction management, none of them relate to the operation of the stables and the well-being of horses and riders. This is a unique situation where granting permission without further investigation could jeopardise the future of a much-loved business. Developers have a very casual attitude to human and equine safety. I want to put on record that I'm not in any way exaggerating the risks involved, and if Merton Council wants Wimbledon Village Stables to continue to exist, it needs to address these issues I've raised before allowing this development to take place. I'm relying on you to all impose conditions to safeguard the stables.
Can I call on Helen Cuthbert, please?
Good evening, Chair and members. The Dog and Fox has been in Young's ownership since 1834. It occupies a prominent corner position in the Wimbledon Village conservation area, and its distinctive Oriel Tower is held in particularly high regard as a focal point. Over the last 2 years, we have worked closely with the planning and conservation officers and consultees to prepare an extension scheme that is considered entirely appropriate from both design and residential amenity perspectives. Our proposed scheme will provide 12 additional boutique hotel rooms and additional floor space for the pub restaurant, and make the building more accessible to guests through the provision of a lift. The proposed extension above the single flat roof on the restaurant building has been set back from the High Street edge to create a buffer and maintain views of the most recognisable features of the Dog and Fox. One of the key objectives throughout the development of our proposals has been to ensure that the impact on neighbouring residents and businesses is minimised. In particular, we recognise that comments have been received in relation to the construction impact of the development, particularly on the stables, and we would like to reassure members by emphasising that our development proposals are modest in construction terms. There is no major demolition work planned, but however, in response to the concerns, we prepared a draft construction management plan, which was independently reviewed by a qualified equestrian. If planning consent is granted for our extension proposals, Young's will appoint contractors and will therefore work more closely once the contractors are appointed with the neighbouring stables business to manage the impacts of the construction activities, as they have done throughout previous extension and refurbishment works. The point on servicing will decrease because there would be one operator, the public house operator, rather than two separate operators for the existing situation. And in addition, all site setup for the construction management plan is placed away from the stables area. Young's are very sensitive about developing this site and will work very closely with neighbours upon the appointment of contractors. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, questions, please. Any questions? Councillor Judd.
I wonder if I could just review the provisions for protecting the horses whilst they're in the stables during the period of construction, thinking of the noise and vibration, and how that can be reduced, and how we can know that be assured that the horses will not suffer detriment by dint of that noise.
Thank you. At page 130, we have itemised the measures which are contained within the currently submitted construction management plan. These measures, in and of themselves, make sense. The area that we'd like more detail on is the detail of how these are going to be implemented. Noisy activities which may frighten horses are not to be carried out when riders are mounted. For example, that's going to be something that's quite difficult to control, so we do want a bit of meat on the bones. This construction management plan has been carried out by a qualified equestrian, but there are still some questions we have in it. Obviously, the impact on neighbouring use should be minimised to the extent that it's not particularly harmful. However, we don't feel it's something that the application could reasonably refuse on if these measures are properly taken into account. Issues like the stable will be informed in advance of particularly noisy works. They may be informed before, but would the noisy works not occur at critical times? So we think there is still some more work to go to make sure that we can be absolutely clear that the impact on the horses will be acceptable. Now, horses would come out of the stable here and walk onto the main road, so it's going to be critical that the route is kept clear at all times. Other suggestions have included a visual screen along the back throughout the construction, because it's not just noise but startling visual disturbance which could cause a horse to have difficulties. I'm not an equestrian expert, so I've looked at the comments on both sides, but I do think that the objector has some reasonable points in terms of the welfare of the horses, and so this is something that we would look to be dealt with through a construction management plan that specifically takes account of the impact on horses. Now, I appreciate the condition doesn't actually mention horses, it talks about neighbouring residents or... sorry, bear with me. So noise and dust and dirt, but I think if members are amenable to this. Okay, we do have an informative indicator that should be carried out by a qualified equestrian expert, but we've suggested maybe the British Royal Society that it doesn't have to be someone who's necessarily linked with that, but someone a suitably qualified, competent person. But we would like some of these questions which are cropped up in the construction management plan to be answered, and that is what we'd seek to do by condition.
Any other questions? Councillor T.
Thank you, Chair. The officer said that with the additional 12 hotel rooms, there's adequate parking in the village. Would the officer be able to tell me where he believes that additional 12 parking spaces are?
Yeah, this is set out in the parking survey submitted with the application. For more detailed feedback on the parking and highway impacts, I would refer to Saraf, who's very up to speed on this.
Chair, the applicant has carried out an overnight parking surveys and recorded the indicated parking stress levels at the 44% on 2 nights. So there'll be, what they say, there'll be adequate. Within the 200-meter catchment area, they reckon they get about 200 available spaces at a particular night, those 2 nights.
I was just wondering about hours of construction. Are we conditioning that, and can the condition be such that the hours of construction when horses are on the Wimbledon Common and not in the stables?
The difficulty with that is that the horses come in and out throughout the day on different lessons. So instead of being one chunk of the day when they're all out, it would be some of the horses would be out and then some would be in. I don't think all the horses would be out for several hours every day and then come back in at a certain time. I think that would be difficult to achieve through working hours only. It would have to be an arrangement whereby the horses can come in and out and the works can continue at the same time is ideally what we'd look to achieve, because otherwise I don't think there'd be any times where the construction could occur.
Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Joe.
it seems to me that visually looking at it from the street, that this will be a vast improvement on what we have at the moment with the current single-storey extension to one side of the building being replaced with a far more attractive building. Kill the Dog and Fox is an important hostelry in the village, and we would want it to continue to succeed and prosper. And we also know that there is a lack of hotel rooms, of good quality hotel rooms in the Wimbledon area. It's quite important for the economy of Wimbledon that we have decent hotel rooms. So globally I would support the application, but I am concerned about the impact on the horses during the construction period. We hear about considerate contractor schemes. Well, here we need a very considerate contractor.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Chair. The main problem here is during the construction stage. The side, the road towards where the stables are is very narrow, so the contractor won't be able to use that. You'll have to use the front, which is right in the corner where the busy roundabout is. The construction traffic management plan is the only thing that will do two things. Tell the contractor how this is going to be constructed, and I think that will affect the construction price dramatically. Because when the contractor realises he's got no access from the side, he's got very limited access from the front, maybe most of the deliveries or the removals will be done at night time, his construction costs will increase dramatically. So I'd like to have a condition that a construction traffic management plan is done very, very soon, not until the contractor has been appointed, but prepared well before that. So when they do go out to tender, all contractors have access to this detailed construction traffic management plan.
I have to say, I don't think we would have the power to restrict it to that extent. If we grant permission, I mean, it is a pre-commencement condition, but we couldn't insist that the contractors are appointed before that information comes in necessarily. But we will have that information up front before development could commence.
In terms of the actual Dog and Fox and the proposed plans, I think they're accepted by the government and look at this. And I think it as a detract from the street scene. The only problem here, though, is the stables. Now, to my mind, it doesn't sound as if enough consideration has been given to the impact on the horses. So if the kind of impact on the horses is as bad as I fear it might be, I wonder whether that alone is grounds to refuse permission tonight, because the expectation would be that the Dog and Fox would come back with a similar plan, identical plan in fact, but clearer proposals for mitigating the impact on the stables.
Yes, I think probably what I'd suggest here clearly is a sensitive issue. We have the conditions relating to the construction management plan. We've got the informative attached as well. What I'd suggest we do is bolster the particular condition, because that has more meat to it and more clout in terms of what we can do. So we can get the construction management plan to include how the horses are going to be accommodated within that. And then we can have a look at that in great detail. And we have to, as officers, we'd ask for a specialist to submit that information. We haven't got specialists within the authority. We might have investigated that yet. We would certainly look at that from that particular perspective, and if necessary, we could consult the owners of the stables behind as well on that plan to see if there is some arrangement that can be made or that we can improve that condition.
Could we have some kind of arbiter like the British Horse Association or such a body as this to sign off that the horses would not be adversely impacted during the construction?
I think that's probably going a step too far. Whether they have that expertise, it's probably quite a subjective issue. think that would be difficult from a planning perspective to enforce. I think what we hope to do is push it as far as we can in terms of bolstering that condition to ensure that there is some kind of agreement about how much we can avoid disturbance of the horses during construction.
I'd like to Councillor Stanford.
Mr. Milligan just said something about negotiating with the area at the back of the site. Was that about having a different sort of access to the stables? Because currently the only access is obviously along down the side of the Dublin Box. So if there was a possible access from the rear, I can't remember the ranges for the back, particularly through the construction period, would that make it easier so that we'd have to share the passageway alongside the side of the Dublin Box with the construction traffic?
There is a rear access there, but of course it's right next to the stables as well, so it would have to be on the same condition in terms of being stringent in terms of protecting the horses. Whether there's sufficient space on the road, I mean, as we all know, builders manage to build everywhere. Tightest sites you'd ever imagine, they will still manage to do this. The issue here is ensuring that there is through-flow traffic. We'd have to ask our highways colleagues to look at that when the construction management plan is put in.
I was actually talking about the horses using that route temporarily while construction.
That's good. It's a point that can be investigated. I can't see where the route would end up on this plan. Maybe others can enlighten me where that road leads to. It may well not be a possibility, so I don't want to agree something this evening that's we can't absolutely secure, but there's no reason why that couldn't be investigated.
Well, if altered plan has been suggested as part of the condition, I'd like us to vote on this if we have no vote on this, please. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? That is including the bolstered agreement in the condition to protect the horses. And those against? Not voting. Then the application is approved with that condition included. Thank you. I'd like us to take a coffee break. We have 7 other applications to consider. I think it's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.